clear that we're better at finding. It's clear that the tools are better. The EDR guys have figured out how to do their logging and finding and tracking. Researchers are better. Project Zero is amazing. Everything is better. But are we good enough?
No. And I would continue to say no because also it keeps me in a job, but that's not my sole reason of saying
right.
no.
So if we're not good enough then, right? And let's say, what percentage you think we see? What percentage you think we've found? Do you think this is in the range of what we see in this 58 last year is 5% of everything, 20% of everything? Which bucket do you see that?
So I feel like with 95% confidence saying less than 20%,
Less than 20%.
and probably like 75% confidence less than 10%. Even when we just look at the ones we found, like I mentioned earlier, that most times if attackers want a capability to hack into someone's phone or device, they're going to have to chain multiple 0 days. And so when we look at the 0 days we find a lot of those first steps. For example, so say the first render remote code execution vulnerability for a browser. But the next step after that has to be a sandbox escape most of the time, or a local privilege escalation. And we're not finding those as much. And it makes sense because once you get that first step, there's often, types
Obfuscation,
of
it's all hidden, right?
fingerprinting. Attackers don't want to just hand over their 0 days to us researchers.
So wait a second. So wait a second. You're saying that for every OD that gets that gets detected and disclosed and documented, there's potentially 2 or 3 or 4 as part of the stitched chain that are 0 day, but we'll never know about, and they keep that in their arsenal, right? I mean, I believe Mark Dowd explained this on a podcast recently about when a bug dies, what happens. So you're saying it could be 20% of what we're finding, right?
Yeah, I would feel very confident saying we're seeing less than 20% of what's out there. I think if use a broader scope of what 0 day means,
right,
or like things, I would say it's even lower. But in terms of the targets we focus on,
how do we double that?
Definitely.
What needs to be fixed? Is it the tools? Is it better people looking? Is it more people looking? How do we get that number from 20% to say 40%?
So I think what's really hard in this area, and it's something that I've been struggling with, is that all of our quantifiable metrics generally in terms of percentage effectiveness, they're
made up, right?
They're leaning on expertise and conversations and collaborations and things like that to come up, but we will never have a sure answer. And so that's where focusing on those numbers is hard. The things I think we can do to improve it is, one, as an industry, leaning into more transparency, because when a 0 day is detected in the wild, that is the failure case for attackers. They really don't want us to detect it, fix the bug, because they no longer have that thing to use. But we're not able to capitalize, and I say we as industry, the whole industry can, because samples aren't shared or technical details aren't shared or things like that. And I know, like, even from our side, like, transparency on some of these things is really stinking hard because you also don't want to lose your ability to find the next step or things like that. But if we're not, creating an exploit mitigation for every exploit technique, if we're not all sharing that, okay, these are generally who these actors are targeting right now, which is not really my area since I'm not a threat intel person, but, across the board, being able to share all this information to protect those who are generally harmed with 0 days, like, I think that's where we will see the biggest improvement. And obviously more resources going into 0 day detection, especially I think from vendor teams, because they'll generally have the most access, telemetry, things like that.
Can we
I think that
can we linger a little bit on the transparency piece? Because you mentioned it as one of the conclusions and recommendations in the blog. It's kind of calling for an industry standard behavior from all vendors around public disclosure when there's evidence to suggest vulnerabilities exploited in a way. In your mind, what does best practices around disclosure look like? Like, what would be a perfect case scenario that balances that need for transparency and not giving up total visibility into what you have. Because there's, like you just mentioned, there's that balance between not letting them know everything that you know. And so what does it look like in your mind? Is it like standard phrasing in vulnerability reports? What would that look like?
So I think there's a lot of different ways. Like, I'm not even at the perfect best practices stage yet. I would just even like
Okay,
a
so
yes or no.
what's an
Do you have reason
incremental
to
next
believe
step
this
that
is
would
the
make us a little happy?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, Chrome, Microsoft, Adobe, and some others for years and years, if they had reason to believe something was exploited in the wild, whether that was internal to themselves or a researcher reported and told them that, they would use different phrasing across the board to signal to the industry there's some
Exploitation
known
happens, right?
yeah. And so like Microsoft's is they just have a field on all of theirs that says
Yes, yeah.
exploited ? Yes or no. We've talked a little bit about like Chrome's language versus Apple language, Android language. So if we can get that now across the industry as a standard, like I'm almost sort of like, whatever language you want to use, just give us an indicator to know there's some evidence as a
Well,
very
but
first
what do you mean by an indicator?
After that,
Just language, just basic language that it's been exploited, or you're talking an indicator that helps the rest of us go look for signs of it ourselves?
So I will even just take the binary yes or no reason, because
So at
we're
this
not
point,
there
you're
yet.
just
That's not
advocating for baby steps. So at this point, let's not get too excited because we need to have these baby steps. It's just too much.
Yeah. I mean, that's the fact that we cannot be confident for so many large vendors in this industry that they're telling us even yes or no, this vulnerability, there's reason to believe it's exploited in the wild. Like, that's something that I think should be a very basic,
Should be an expectation. It should be a minimal expectation.
minimal
I
action.
mean, and I argue that defenders and buyers, people who are buying these technologies, should be demanding this at a minimum as part of their buying processes.
Yeah, and that's 100% what I was trying and have been trying to advocate for. And I also, talking to vendors, I understand why it's hard for them. And so that's where it's baby steps. But also as an industry, anytime there is that notation that something's exploited in the wild, press for these vendors when they admit that tends to be pretty terrible. It tends to be, oh no, the product A is so hackable, another 0 day in the wild. And so they're like, hey, we got a way less bad press before all of this was
Maddie,
public.
but that's a sign of maturity, though. It's only an immature organization that looks at a fixed bug and sees that as something negative. Every bug that gets fixed, your product is better the next day, immediately. I mean, the idea that you fixed an OD and it's a negative thing, I think that's a sign of like immaturity on their side, not understanding that there's a certain sophistication among buyers that a fix is a better thing.
And I completely agree with you, but I'm coming from the point of how do we get these changes? And so understanding where each of these vendors are to help maybe make that transition easier. So it's easier for them to do the thing we really want as security professionals. And so like another step that I think is super helpful, and I hope that we see more of, is where, especially in these open source products, especially browsers, open source engines, Chromium, Firefox, WebKit, the ability to tie back a CVE to like, what was the patch that was fixed? So we have some understanding of what's the vulnerability. And so like Apple this year, for the first time, started in their release notes for WebKit, which is the browser engine Safari runs on, they will tie back what's the bug report to the CVE. So there's now this way to start making a connection between, okay, this patch was for this CVE bug, and this is the one that was named in the wild. So we can start to get more information. So kudos to Apple for doing that. Chromium does a similar thing. Firefox does a similar thing as well. And so I think each of these incremental baby steps towards more transparency is important, because what that means is while that information of what's the patch for this and the wild bug is not probably useful for the majority of the people on this planet, or even the majority of the security industry, what that means for someone like me in my position is then I can go try to understand the root cause of the bug. I can work to see, was this patch actually complete? Did it just break that exploit they found, or does it fix the underlying problem? What other mitigations can we put into play that might fix the whole bug class instead of just the bug? And like, how did this code end up here? Was it, is it legacy? Was it a process thing that we could help come up with solutions for to prevent it in the future? Like all of those different things that hopefully as the industry, we can learn from this case of in the wild exploitation to make it that much harder in the
Maddie,
future.
in addition to just the pure volume rising, one of the big trends I've seen over the last 3 years, looking at your spreadsheet, is the words memory corruption. Is it memory corruption? How do you describe it? Memory safety, memory, whatever. Memory corruption.
I use memory
It's
corruption.
Like everything's memory corruption. I think this year, we have one that's a design issue, and the rest are all memory corruption issues.
I think it was like 60-something% were memory corruption this year.
Oh no, I'm talking about 22 this year. Yeah, this year. I just looked at 2022.
My brain was
right?
on the year.
You're at 15,
2022,
and I think 14 are memory corruption issues. My point is, since I've been writing about security in 2001, I've been writing about the fight to mitigate memory corruption issues. It's 2022. This feels like not a tractable problem. It feels very much like your spreadsheet is making it very, very clear that this is the number one thing we need to address, mitigating memory corruption issues. When you look at the landscape of this issue over the years, this class of vulnerability over the years, do you think it's gotten better? Do you feel like this is something that's even fixable without rewriting all code bases? Like, where are we in this battle against memory safety issues? A lot in there, because it's like it drives me crazy.
So you might have to retarget me, but do I think trying to extinguish memory corruption is a worthy cause that we can actually make progress on?
Of course it's a worthy cause.
Yes.
Is it doable? And then why doesn't, after 20 years, we're still looking at data that says everything is memory corruption?
Yeah, I mean, I get frustrated that it's all memory corruption. You want to see new, interesting bug types, people focusing on logic issues and things like that. Do I think things have probably gotten better? I do. But I don't think, 10, 20 years ago, we had the same tracking, the ability to find as many memory corruption. We didn't have as many static analysis, automated tools running and finding lots of things.
Are we just generating too much code? There's just so much code being